You're watching Newsday TV. Thanks for joining us. I'm Elisa DiStefano. Former Congressman George Santos has just pleaded guilty in federal court to wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. The guilty plea comes a month before the disgraced politician was supposed to go on trial. The Justice Department is holding a news conference right now to talk about the details of this plea agreement, so let's listen to what prosecutors are saying.
Scott D'Alessandro, Assistant Special Agent in charge of Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation, and Nassau County District Attorney Ann Donnelly. This case was truly a team effort, and I'm grateful to all for their work that brought us to this day. A short time ago, after years of telling lies, former Congressman George Santos stood in the courthouse right behind me and finally, under oath, told the truth. And that truth is he is a criminal. Santos pled guilty to committing serious crimes involving fraud and identity theft. He also admitted to committing all other crimes he was charged with in the superseding indictment. As a result, he'll finally be held to account for his actions. He will go to prison for at least 2 years. He will be required to forfeit the money he made illegally, and he will be required to repay the victims that he swindled. Now, before delving into the details of today's plea, I want to emphasize that it's always a sad day when an elected official admits criminal activity. The residents of Nassau and Queens counties elected Santos to represent them honorably and honestly. Instead, those constituents were badly deceived. They came to learn that they were victims of a fraud of unprecedented proportion, and they had to watch helplessly while Santos rode into Congress on a campaign of lies. Our government institutions were also victimized. Any corruption and dishonesty by elected officials erodes the public's trust and faith in our political leaders. Today's plea represents justice for those constituents and government institutions, as well as for Santos' individual victims. And it's just one example of how my office works to ensure that no one is above the law, and that wrongdoers are and will be held accountable regardless of their position and title. And it's my sincere hope that our efforts help counter the corrosive effect of public officials like Santos that they have on the community's trust in government. And our hope is that this helps rebuild faith in our institutions. So today, for what may seem like the first time since he started his campaign for Congress, Mr. Santos told the truth about his criminal schemes. He admitted that he lied, he stole, and he conned people. Santos' countless lies and audacious misrepresentations catapulted him to Congress. But for the victims of Santos' various financial crimes and the community whose falsehoods and fabrications deprived them of honest representation in Congress, he is worthy only of infamy. By lying about his fundraising success and ability to self-fund his campaign, Santos manipulated and fabricated his campaign's FEC reports to fraudulently induce investment in his race for Congress. For this conduct, Santos pled guilty to wire fraud. He also pled guilty to aggravated identity theft, admitting that he stole the identities of 11 unwitting people, including members of his own family, and used them to report tens of thousands of dollars in fake donations to his campaign without their knowledge or consent. But that's not all. In addition to pleading guilty to those 2 crimes, Santos also admitted to a litany of other crimes for which the court will hold him accountable at sentencing. First, Santos admitted that he stole the identities and credit card numbers of multiple people and used the stolen information to charge his victims' credit cards for his and others' campaigns and to put money in his own pockets. Second, Santos admitted that he tricked donors into giving thousands of dollars to a company that Santos falsely claimed was an independent nonprofit organization, but in reality was just a bank account that he secretly controlled. He then used those donations to fund his lifestyle, including purchasing luxury designer clothing and making credit card payments, a car payment, and cash withdrawals. Third, Santos admitted that at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, he committed fraud by lying each week to the New York State Department of Labor to obtain emergency unemployment insurance benefits, when in reality, he was gainfully employed as a regional director of an investment firm. Fourth, and finally, Santos admitted that he fabricated his personal wealth in the financial disclosure report he submitted to the U.S. House of Representatives after he was elected in 2022, inventing millions of dollars in assets that never existed and concealing his true income, including the unemployment insurance benefits that he had fraudulently collected. Now, the greatest justice we can give to all of Santos' victims is to make him tell the truth of his crimes on the record and to hold him accountable with a prison sentence. My office will continue to aggressively prosecute public corruption and those who undermine the public's faith in our government through fraud and deceit. Now, I want to thank our outstanding prosecution team, Assistant United States Attorneys Ryan Harris, Anthony Bagnola, and Laura Zuckerwise, along with trial attorneys Jacob Steiner and John Taddy of the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section. They were assisted by the outstanding work of the FBI Special Agents Katrina LaPeruta and Ken Hosey, FBI Forensic Accountant Paige Owens, FBI Intelligence Analyst Julianne Wolfe, Nassau County District Attorney's Office Detective Investigator Gavin Shea, IRS Special Agent Samantha Cadlick, and Paralegal Specialist Rachel Friedman and Denora Orozco. I will now ask Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General Argentieri to say a few words.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Peace. I'm Nicole Argentieri. I'm the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General and Head of the Department of Justice's Criminal Division. Today, we announce that former Congressman George Santos will be held accountable for fraud, identity theft, and lying to the American people, including as part of his campaign for election to the U.S. House of Representatives. Santos has pleaded guilty to defrauding the National Republican Congressional Committee, to obtain funding for his campaign, and to committing aggravated identity theft to facilitate that crime. Santos also admitted that he repeatedly lied in violation of federal criminal law, including to campaign donors about how he would use their contributions, to the Federal Election Commission about these contributions, to the House of Representatives about his personal finances, and to the government to unlawfully obtain unemployment benefits. Our democracy depends upon a fair and transparent election process. And as part of that process, it is imperative that candidates for elected office follow the law and that they act with integrity and transparency. George Santos did none of those things. Instead, as Santos acknowledged today through his plea, he fraudulently obtained financial and logistical support for his campaign from the National Republican Congressional Committee through its Young Guns program. Now, programs like this exist to give a boost to candidates whose campaigns have demonstrated a threshold level of support from the public in form of donor contributions. By defrauding a program like this, a candidate can obtain additional campaign funding without actually having the requisite support, diverting funds that would have gone to other candidates, and thereby distorting our election process. Santos's conduct also violated laws that require accurate public reporting. Political campaigns are required by law to file reports of their contributions and their expenditures with the Federal Election Commission. And candidates for federal office are required to file personal financial disclosures with congressional ethics committees. These laws exist to ensure that the public has accurate information about both the personal finances of individuals who seek to represent them in Congress and how their political campaigns are funded. The transparency and accuracy that these laws require is critical to the proper functioning of our democracy. Transparent reporting allows the American people to have accurate information before choosing their elected representatives, and to demand accountability from both their political representatives and those representatives' financial supporters. Violations of these laws are incredibly serious, precisely because they undermine the integrity of our election process. And that is why the Criminal Division is committed to holding accountable public officials who abuse this process. Today's guilty plea is also significant because it requires Santos to pay more than $300,000 in restitution to the victims of his criminal schemes. The Department of Justice is committed to seeking justice for victims who've been harmed by criminal conduct and affording them redress. And I am pleased that today's resolution does exactly that. I'd like to conclude by underscoring something that U.S. Attorney Peace mentioned in his remarks. Today's announcement is the result of excellent teamwork by dedicated public servants. I want to thank U.S. Attorney Peace and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York for their partnership on this important case. I would also like to express my appreciation for the excellent work done by our law enforcement partners, the FBI's New York Field Office, IRS Criminal Investigation, the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Inspector General, and the Nassau County DA's Office. Finally, I want to emphasize how proud I am of the prosecutors and support staff from the Criminal Division's Public Integrity Section, who worked tirelessly to bring this case alongside our partners in New York. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to Christy Curtis, the Acting Assistant Director in charge of FBI's New York Field Office.
Good afternoon. I'm Christy Curtis, the Acting Assistant Director of the FBI's New York Field Office. Today, George Santos admitted he lied, stole, and cheated his way into elected office. Santos brazenly committed multiple criminal frauds in his dealings with the public, members of his own political party, Congress, and other government entities. Santos lied to increase his congressional campaign's financial support. He falsely claimed to be unemployed during the pandemic to gain government assistance. He misappropriated campaign donations on luxury items, and he stole the identities of supporters for his personal benefit. However, due to the diligence of members of the investigative and prosecutorial team, Santos will be held accountable for these crimes. When an elected official betrays the trust placed in them, it undermines the foundation of our democracy. Today should be a warning of any public official who wants to use their office for any type of personal gain. The FBI is committed to investigating public corruption and eradicating it. I would like to thank the FBI special agents, intelligence analysts, forensic accountants, and all FBI employees who assisted with this investigation, in partnership with the Eastern District of New York's U.S. Attorney Brian Pierce and the U.S. Attorney's Office Public Corruption Unit, the Department of Justice Public Integrity Section, the IRS's Criminal Investigative Division, the Department of Labor's Office of Inspector General, and the Nassau County District Attorney's Office. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce IRS Assistant Special Agent D'Alessandro.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott D'Alessandro. I am the Assistant Special Agent in charge for IRS Criminal Investigation here in the New York Field Office. I would like to begin by thanking Brian Pierce, the U.S. Attorney, and all the prosecutors assigned to this case who oversaw this investigation. I would also like to recognize the FBI's New York Field Office and the Nassau County District Attorney's Office for their incredible work leading to today's guilty plea. Lastly, I would like to recognize the IRS Special Agent who spent months on this case following the money, tracking illicit funds and transactions to prepare a comprehensive financial investigation and ultimately aid in bringing charges against Mr. Santos. This type of financial fraud and corruption is not a victimless crime. The victims in this case are the American people. They are his constituents, those who voted for him and his congressional peers. The victims are the donors and supporters whose money Mr. Santos used for his personal expenses. But the ultimate victim is the erosion of trust a crime like this causes to the American people's confidence in our country's campaign finance systems. Today's guilty plea is an important step in demonstrating that no one is above the law. IRS Criminal Investigation remains committed to working with our law enforcement partners to identify and investigate fraud by anyone who blatantly disregards our federal statutes. Thank you. Now, introduce Nassau County DA Donnelly.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Nassau County District Attorney Ann Donnelly, and I want to thank U.S. Attorney Breon Peace and the rest of our federal partners here today for doing what the people of the United States, and in my case, the people of Nassau County, expect us to do, and that's to prosecute criminals. It doesn't matter how much money you have, what political persuasion you are, what political power you have. If you commit a crime, we're coming for you. Working together to prosecute a liar, a cheat, and a thief. For that's what George Santos is. And that's what his plea of guilty here today proves. When George Santos' nefarious acts came to light, my office opened an investigation. When U.S. Attorney Peace suggested we join forces and combine our work, I jumped at the chance. And now the fruits of the efforts of the investigators and the attorneys who built a formidable prosecution that resulted in today's guilty plea. George Santos is many things. He's a liar, he's a master manipulator, and a con man. But one thing he's not above the law. No one is above the law. I will continue to fight against corruption in the seats of power. It is the job that the people of Nassau County elected me to do. And together, all of us will work to ensure that the laws of this great country are upheld, no matter what. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, everybody.
You were just listening to the Justice Department talking about the plea agreement for George Santos. The former congressman spoke to the media after his guilty plea.
It's clear to me now that I allowed ambition to cloud my judgment, leading me to make decisions that were unethical and guilty. Pleading guilty is a step I never imagined I'd take. But it is a necessary one because it is the right thing to do. It's not only a recognition of my misrepresentation to others, but more profoundly, it is my own recognition of the lies I told myself over these past years. It is a confirmation with these truths that have flooded me with deep regret for the choices I made.
Deep regret for the choices he made. I am joined by Newsday columnist Joy Brown to put this all into perspective. Joy, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, anything that surprises you?
Well, you know, his house of cards finally collapsed. Finally. Not just in terms of what he did in terms of running for Congress, but everything he did before then. You know, there's a biography of him called The Fabulist, which basically says that he never told the truth in a great portion of his life. So to hear him say, you know, I'm reflecting back and I made some bad choices. He can say that. But when you take a look at this particular case, what made it so, in the realm of things, difficult for him to proceed and with lies is it was a paper case. Checks, the IRS, paperwork. It would have been extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, for him to overcome. He was trapped.
Right, and this has led to so many changes. Let's just break down a few of the most impactful.
Well, you know, Breon Peace said to him, he is worthy only of infamy, but he's worthy of a couple of other things as well. One, you know, it was his election which changed the balance to help Long Island. Long Island helped change the balance of power in the Congress. It's changed the way candidates are vetted by political parties And it's also changed the way candidates are vetted by media. You know, everybody's taking a close look at everything else. It's changed the way people look at campaign finances. It used to be if something was filed late, hey, maybe it's going to come, or maybe we're not paying attention. Everybody's paying attention to that now. He's had an impact on ethics, right? I think what Congress did to him and his leaving his elected position, you see that now with Melendez in New Jersey. You know, you're convicted, you're out of there. And also, they made a big deal out of this, and I think it's worthy of making a big deal out of representation, his constituents. His constituents said, oh, I would see them at the courthouse over and over. We don't have anybody doing our work. We have nowhere to go. We have no representation at all. And I think that what that's done is help people kind of double down, and it's weird, but pay attention to constituents, because that's what you're there to do in the first place.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk a little bit about sentencing. Pleaded guilty to 2, acknowledged 4 more. What does that mean?
Now, he is going to be sentenced on February the 7th. And in that process, the probation department kind of goes through and they make a sentencing recommendation. Also, the prosecutors make a sentencing recommendation. A couple of things real quick. One, the charge of, one of his charges has a 2-year minimum. That is falsification. Right. Which one? The falsification.
Yeah, they said at least 2 years, yes.
Well, it's a minimum.
Yeah.
And they noticed that they said that he would go to jail for 2 years. Now, in the sentencing report, you can take into account a lot of different things. One thing they'll take into account is that in the United States, at least, he's never been charged or convicted of any kind of crime. But because he acknowledged 4 other things, the stolen credit cards, the tricking donors, all of that.
COVID, lying during COVID about unemployment, fabricating personal wealth, yes.
The judge can take all of that into account in deciding what sentence he could get. And remember, on the other charge, that one has a max 20 years.
So we could see quite,
The sentencing recommendations from the prosecutors, I would expect, given the strong language we saw today, they think he should go to prison for a very long time. It'll ultimately be up to the judge who'll take that, what the prosecutors say, into account, and also what the probation department says.
So Joy, what's next for George Santos? What do you think?
I don't think we will ever hear the end of George Santos. I don't think it's in his DNA to go away. If he goes to prison, we're still going to hear from him. If he doesn't go to prison, we're still going to hear from him. I don't think he can do anything other than be George Santos.
I agree.
Unless he has a different name.
Yes. Anything else that you want to break down about what we saw today? Were you surprised he stopped to speak to the media?
George Santos?
I know,
You're kidding me, right? No, of course he was always going to stop and he's going to go speak to the media. But I think that listening to the prosecutors, I mean, some of that passion that came through, right? This was, it's always a sad day when an elected official ends up convicted of a crime.
That's what got me, I
think. He
Yeah.
rode into Congress on a wave of lies. He lied, he stole, he conned people. And it also said that, again, when he finally told the truth, he admitted to all of these different crimes and to all of these different lies. That's when he finally told the truth.
Yeah, that he is a criminal.
That he is, in fact, a criminal. So as of today, George Santos, they called him a lot of different things, but the one thing you can call him today is a convicted criminal.
Thanks so much, Joy Brown, for your insight and expertise. We have Newsday's Virginia Huey and courts reporter Grant Parpan. They're outside of the federal court in Central Islip. With more, you have been our eyes and ears today, Virginia. What have you experienced? What have you seen happen there?
Well, for months, former Congressman George Santos has insisted that he's not guilty and vowed to fight the charges. But this afternoon, Santos pleaded guilty, admitting to wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, along with a litany of other crimes. And Santos appeared nervous as he addressed the court and called his admitted crimes a betrayal of trust of his supporters and donors, and he promised to make amends. Now, joining me now is Grant Parpan. He's Newsday's courts reporter. A dramatic turn of events in this case. Walk us through what Santos admitted to doing.
We were here 6 days ago expecting a trial to start in just a few weeks, and that's now changed. And George Santos is now facing guaranteed time in federal prison. The charge of aggravated identity theft carries with it a minimum penalty of 2 years in prison. He can also be sentenced consecutively to up to 20 years for the wire fraud charge. They gave an estimated guideline range that said he would likely serve somewhere between about 6 and 7 years in federal prison, or at least that's what will be recommended under the guideline range. We'll find out for certain in February when he's sentenced right back here before Judge Seibert.
Can you talk a little bit more about the nature of the wire fraud charge that he admitted to committing?
Yeah, so in addition to pleading guilty to the 2 charges, he stipulated to 4 offenses that he committed that can be used against him when he's sentenced. And that includes access device fraud, right? So with that, he's using people's personal identification and their credit card numbers to generate payments to himself that he used for his own personal advantage. Wire fraud, creating this company Redstone Strategy and saying it's a nonprofit, and then using that money that donors thought would go towards campaign purchases, television advertising, and using that for his personal benefit. Theft of public money, right? He claimed he was on unemployment for a period of time when he was employed. And then he also goes, and when he files his financial disclosure forms, he claims to have a significant income far beyond what he had. He claims to have more than $1 million in a checking account, more than $1 million in a savings account, and he doesn't disclose the income that he got from his unemployment benefits as well as his employer. So he admits to all those things in court today.
Now, in addition to the prison time, he was also ordered to pay substantial restitution as part of this plea deal.
Yeah, he'll have to pay $373,000 in restitution to victims of his schemes, but he'll also have to pay within 30 days of his sentencing in February. Now, they may adjourn if he doesn't have the money, but he needs to come up with more than $200,000. I think it was $202,000 in forfeiture money. And so, Santos is a person who maybe doesn't have that money. His lawyers assured us outside of the courthouse that he will come up with that money. We'll see. I guess we'll know in January when they're seeking potentially an extension for his sentencing.
And this plea agreement means that he doesn't have to go on trial. The prosecutors had outlined that they were going to call many witnesses and had overwhelming evidence that they were going to present.
Yeah, and his attorneys, we got a minute with them as we were walking out, and they said the reason, that he really wanted to do this is because he didn't want to. Now, this is what they say. He did not want to put his victims through a trial. It's not just that he would have to go through a trial. He's used to this sort of thing, right? He's used to, and some might argue he relishes the attention sometimes, Mr. Santos. But victims would have to show up here, and these are people who would have to come and testify against him. They do not want to do this. Nobody wants to put this through. At the end of the day, most cases, people do not want to go through with the trial. And this was a case that it probably makes sense in the end that it ended this way.
Okay. Thank you, Grant. Santos's sentencing date is set for February 7th of next year.
Virginia, we did have one question for you.
Yeah, can I you're in the courtroom with him during this entire proceeding. Number one, what was his demeanor in there? I know he had to admit to things. What was he like?
He was somber. His eyes appeared red when he walked into the courtroom. He had sunglasses on, but he was not able to wear them. But while he was making his statement of admitting his guilt, he did appear nervous and was kind of speeding through a prepared statement. And the judge at one point said, "Please slow down," for the court reporter. So he did appear nervous as he was making his statement and calling his admitted crimes a betrayal of trust.
And also, I have always, when I've been there, always there have been constituents of his, or former constituents at this point. Were there any constituents in the room? Was there any reaction in that room?
There were no constituents that I could see in the room. There was nobody outside here that I could see. I mean, I know what you're talking about. And when he was arraigned last May, there was a huge showing of constituents with signs and everything, but not this time. It was much more quiet.
All right, thanks so much, Virginia. And we will have comprehensive coverage of the George Santos case on Newsday.com. So if you would like to read more, you could click Get More below the Newsday TV video box. It has been quite a day in Central Islip today. You're watching Newsday TV. I'm Elisa DiStefano here with Joy Brown. Thanks so much for joining us.